Good morning. This is Dishha Bagchi for ThePrint, and we are back with Lieutenant General H.S. Panag to discuss his column from this week, Army Misreading Terrorist Tactics. Pakistan hasn't taken its eye off aim to wear India down. Welcome back, General. Thank you for being here.
As I always say, it's a pleasure to discuss my column every week with you, Disha.
So in this week's column, you look at the recent case of insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir and how the army misread terrorist tactics in the incident. So to begin with, what do you think has contributed to the recent lapses in the Indian Army's operations in Jammu and Kashmir over the past 2 years?
This column was inspired by the Gadul Ahlan encounter that lasted 7 days, beginning on the night of 12-13 September and right up to last Tuesday, where we lost 2 army officers, Colonel Manpreet Singh and his company commander, Major Ashish Dhanchak, and a DSP, Humayun Bhatt, and Sepoy Pradeep Singh from the same unit, 19 Rashtriya Rifles. And 2 terrorists have reported to be killed. One's body has been found, and the search was on for the second body. Now, while doing research for this, I also came across that over the last 2 years, there have been a number of encounters, almost 6 to 8, in which we have lost more soldiers than the terrorists killed. In fact, after a long time, in these encounters, the ratio of security forces versus terrorists killed is in favor of the terrorists. So I analyzed as to what are the reasons as to why all this happened. Firstly, since 5 October 2019, after Article 370 was repealed, a narrative has been built up politically, and which has also been supported by the army, that the back of the insurgency has been broken, and only the its runt is left, and which must be dealt with very quickly. So consequently, to maintain this narrative, whenever information comes about terrorists, there's undue haste in planning the operations, and the fundamentals get violated. In addition, there's misreading of Pakistan's strategy. There's also a feeling that Pakistan, because of its economic woes, its internal turmoil, and the pressure that is being put on it on the Afghan-Pakistan border, and internally by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is being supported by Afghan Taliban, that it no longer can sustain an insurgency. Now, this is not the case. Pakistan remains committed to wearing India down by 1,000 cuts. There's no change in its strategy. Yes, its degree of violence and its guidance to the terrorists is carefully calibrated. And currently, the chips are a little down for Pakistan because of the pressure of Financial Action Task Force, its internal problems, economic woes. So it has calibrated the insurgency, and it wants to maintain it at a level that is the current level that is prevailing. And since 2010, in fact, the insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, by actions of the security forces, good counter-infiltration grid, the counter-infiltration measures, the CI grid, it has plateaued. In fact, the graph I had quoted from the South Asia Terrorism Portal, that there's a slight rise, in fact, from 2018 to 2023 as compared to the previous 6 years from 2012 to 2017. So these are some of the reasons as to why there has been, a number of setbacks in Jammu and Kashmir over the last 2 years. While overall, if you look at the situation, the army is containing the insurgency. After Article 370 was repealed, there has been a crackdown on the financiers, on the political and overt overground supporters of terrorism, and indeed, to that extent, their support system has got diluted. But the people are still not fully, with the government, and they still support the terrorists. The terrorists are the hearts and minds of the people has not yet been won. And last but not the least, the political initiative is also absent. While the governor's rule is there, a political initiative which calls for accommodation with the political parties and which calls for elections, maybe possibly re-granting statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, this is still absent. So these are the main reasons as to why there is a degree of complacency has set in, and undue hurry in conduct of operations, and misreading of Pakistan's strategy and the changed tactics of the terrorists, that we have had setbacks in a number of operations.
So, firstly, why do you think there's been a lack of a political initiative in the region?
No, you see, this is an ongoing thing. In fact, it has also got a lot to do with with ideology, because Pakistan supports the terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir, because Kashmir Valley and the areas of certain districts in the south, in the Doda Kishtwar area as well as Punch Rajouri area, these are Muslim predominant, and the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is the power in the center, believes in Hindutva. So there is a reluctance to start a political dialogue until such time the insurgency is totally, quelled, or I would say that it's eradicated, which doesn't happen because the solution to a insurgency is always political. So by treating it purely as a law and order problem that can be eradicated is wrong. And then just see the contrast that is there between how Manipur is being handled by the Bharatiya Janata Party, which has got its own government there and also at the center.
Right.
Let alone impose president's rule. Even this district councils, which is the main demand of the Kuki Zo minority, is not being granted. And a kind of a status quo of anarchical status quo is prevailing in Manipur. So this is how the Kashmiris would probably view what is happening in Manipur and what is happening within Kashmir. So that is why I say that there is a requirement for taking a political initiative, and we should, move out of the old thought process of religious kind of affiliation between Kashmir and Pakistan. Kashmiris are Indians, and we have to solve our problems, and we have to solve them politically. That's the only way insurgencies can be solved.
Right. So in your column, you also talk about how the tactics of terrorists in this region has changed over the years. So could you talk a little bit about how you see these tactics have changed? And
Yeah, one, of course, I mentioned to you that Pak's strategy has remained unchanged, and it is likely to maintain this level of insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir for a long time. So we had to be prepared for a long haul. Uh, there's no dearth of recruits for the insurgents, uh, whether they come from Pakistan, Punjab, or they come from um, uh, sort of Kashmir itself, the indigenous terrorists, Kashmiris. Uh, there is there is a kind of a pattern that the leadership is being provided by the Pakistani terrorists, and the foot soldiers who sustain the insurgency are from Kashmir. Infiltration certainly has reduced, but what is happening is that no matter how good the counter-infiltration grid is, certain degree of trickle infiltration does take place. And since bulk of the uh, terrorists are locals, so their training is organized in-house. And to sustain them, arms and ammunition and other stores are brought in by couriers. And there are also reports that they are being dropped by drones. So despite all the measures that the armed forces have taken, uh, Pakistan will be able to sustain about anything from 150 to 200 terrorists in the coming years, unless it steps up and tries to increase it. Of course, it's an ongoing game between what Pakistan does and what the terrorists do and what the armed forces do. Now, another noticeable thing is that earlier the terrorists used to have their bases in the villages. They enjoyed the local support. They still do. But the army had mastered the art of how to eliminate them in the villages. Uh, so the villages used to be cordoned off, and the terrorists invariably had to take shelter in one particular house. And it's very easy with fire of few rocket launcher rounds that the entire house is brought down. Of course, the people are paid. They are firstly asked to evacuate the house, and subsequently they are adequate compensation is given. So this was the drill we were following for a long time, and very successfully at that. And it was the terrorists used to use the forests only uh, as when they had to escape, and they never made bases in the forests, especially in the Kashmir Valley. So now what has happened is that since the number of terrorists is overall reduced, so they are not directly attacking the armed forces. They have taken shelter in the forests, and based in the forests, they are relying upon probably one of the oldest tactics. That is the tactics of ambush, which is a surprise attack from a concealed position on an unsuspecting enemy, moving or temporarily halted enemy. Now, that's the definition of ambush. More often than not, uh, the operations the army launches are based on sources, and terrorists use these sources to lay a trap. They, firstly, they still enjoy local support. Then also, any new recruit who comes to join the terrorists, he's asked to prove himself by first acting as a source for security forces and luring them into a trap. And this is what happens a number of times. And during the confusion of the ambush, so either the source slips away if he's being forced to accompany the armed forces, or if he dies, he becomes a martyr. Now, so this is what has changed. Then the terrorists also observe a pattern, that what pattern security forces are following, and then they spring a kind of opportunity ambush also. So this, but number of cases that have taken place is because the terrorists, the security forces have been taken into a trap by the sources. The 5 soldiers, special forces soldiers who were killed in Kandi forest, I think on 24th of May, was for this reason. I have given that example and quoted the link also. Then this present operation, in all likelihood, that it was a source that led the army, the column, to a predetermined ambush site.
Right.
So this is the changed tactics, and we'll have to the armed forces will have to adapt to them.
So when you were discussing the army's approach, you mentioned that there was a complacency and some of the fundamentals of such counter-terrorist operations were being ignored or missed. So what are some of these fundamentals of a planned counter-terrorist operation?
There's an old adage that terrorists have to succeed only once, but the armed forces have to succeed all the time. So, army has got experience of 34 years of counterinsurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, 67 years from 1956 onwards to date in the northeast, including 10 years of Punjab. There is nothing about counterinsurgency operations that is not known to the army. Everything has been. We have seen the terrorists, the insurgents, the militants, including Pakistanis along the LOC. They have tried all tricks. Everything is well known to us. So one should know all these things. There should logically be no reason to repeat such errors. But what happens is that conduct of counterinsurgency operations is very strenuous and physically very demanding and psychologically very demanding. In the peak of insurgency, when it lasted up to 2000, up to about 2007, 2008, 2008 actually, mostly, there used to be 2 to 3 encounters every night. So sheer survival instincts and being always at it the soldiers had to remain alert. And so complacency was very rare. But now with the insurgency at low ebb, terrorists not initiating action, so all kinds of patrolling, all kinds of domination and carrying out activities is extremely taxing. And yet no encounter may take place. But in the Rashtriya Rifle battalions, on the gate there used to be a saying written in Hindi, "Aaj encounter hoga." That means to keep the soldiers alert. Today it will happen. You have to be prepared. But with long gaps between encounters, less number of terrorists not initiating action, so certain degree of complacency sets in. And when information is received about terrorists, undue haste is shown and the fundamentals get violated. Also, the terrorists, they watch for a pattern of activities by the security forces. So when there's less contact, so the pattern, everybody falls into a pattern. Like we have infiltration ambushes along the line of control. So these ambushes start following a pattern. So at times, the ambushers are themselves get ambushed by the adversary. Similarly, the terrorists keep observing a patrol or any other vehicles violating, security precautions, and then they spring an ambush, either planned or opportunity. Opportunity is when you suddenly see something and you do it. Now, ambush is a very basic tactics of terrorists. To defeat the ambush, you have to, the most important thing is to get surprised by the terrorists, most important thing is tactical movement. That troops must always move tactically. And tactical movement demands that there should be reconnaissance ahead of the moving troops. Even if 10 men move, 2 people are nominated what is called the scouts. They move 60 to 70 meters ahead of the force, so that the entire force does not come under fire. Napoleon used to say, a leader has the right to be beaten, but never the right to be surprised. That means if you don't have reconnaissance, you don't do proper tactical movement, the chances of you being surprised are very high. In fact, there's another saying of Napoleon which says that any company commander who is surprised will be court-martialed, thereby implying that he has violated the fundamental of tactical movement and having reconnaissance ahead of him. Now, if there was reconnaissance ahead of the party, of the commanding officer's party, of Colonel Manpreet Singh party, why would the entire party come under fire? It is then that the people, the leading elements would have been fired upon, contacted, and then the main body would actually have remained, ready for action or counteraction, whatever is required. In this case, they appear to have walked straight into the ambush. That means the fundamentals of tactical movement were being violated. Also, every time you conduct an operation against terrorists, you first establish what is called the outer cordon, a broad cordon where you plug all escape routes, then an inner cordon, which is a second tier tightening noose, then there's a strike element. And all move tactically into position. And the strike element then moves in for establishing contact and carrying out the operation, or the inner cordon also starts closing in towards the terrorists. Unless you do this, terrorists will escape. And this is what happened in some of the examples that I have given. That we got the worse off. We came second best in the whole encounter, and in a number of cases the terrorists just got away. And because the cordons were not established properly, no matter how difficult the terrain is, these are prerequisites. And if you don't do this, then obviously the operations will go wrong. When you use sources in counterinsurgency operations, betrayal must be assumed. You must start on the premise that there will be betrayal, that there can be a trap. You simply cannot rely upon the information, no matter how authentic it is. That is the norm in insurgency. And all these tricks have been tried, and not only by the terrorists, even the army does similar tricks. At times we lure the terrorists also in similar manner. So you have to go on the assumption that there will be betrayal, that their things will go wrong, and you have to pre-plan the kind of counteractions. Because if you violate the fundamentals, then I'm afraid that you will suffer a large number of casualties. Leon Uris, the famous author, he wrote a book called The Battle Cry, and where he quotes his Marine sergeant. He's about his own experience in the army. And his sergeant says, it's a kind of a small little poem. We want you alive. Let the others sign off, die for his country. We want you alive. No, the implication was that to remain alive, you must not violate fundamentals and do operations with all precautions. Last but not the least, the large number of casualties that have taken place of the leadership, I'm talking of officers in particular. Indian Army has a tradition of leading from the front, and it's a very good tradition. It's a fail-safe tradition, and our officers' casualties, both in wars and in insurgencies, have been very high. But having said this, a balance has to be struck. The loss of a commanding officer, particularly in insurgency, lowers the morale of the troops of that unit, and also others when the commanding officer dies. It's like if the numero uno of 1,000 men has been killed in action. So this a balance has to be struck. At the same time, please remember that the question is not of the bravery, sacrifice, or leadership qualities of the officers, or for that matter, of the soldiers. The question is that the lives of these noble souls, these brave hearts, can be saved by taking some of the fundamental precautions that I have mentioned. And the most important of all in this is that no movement, no matter for what, can be carried out non-tactically. You got to have reconnaissance in front of you. It's a thumb rule.
Right. So now that you mentioned some of the ways the army must take its fundamentals more seriously, what are some other steps you think the Indian Army can take to better conduct operations in the future in this area to avoid the casualties of such?
So I deal with this in the last part of my column when I say that what's the way forward? The way forward is that we must not build false narratives or a marginal improvement of the situation, or certain aspects of improvement of the situation must not be taken as that the insurgency is over. Insurgencies always, the solution to insurgencies has to be found politically. It cannot be eradicated. Infiltration cannot be stopped. And in totality, it can be controlled, it can be reduced to a trickle, it can be stopped in totality. And it's extremely difficult. There have been no instance of militarily bringing down an insurgency unless you run a steamroller from one end to the other. It has happened in Sri Lanka, but as a democracy, there are a host of other repercussions because of this. And as a democratic nation which upholds morality and everything, we simply cannot follow those kind of tactics. So we have to be prepared for a long haul. Pak's strategy is not going to change. A political initiative is required, which will it'll be a step towards winning the hearts and minds of the people. A lot of people make mockery of this statement that the hearts and minds of the people can never be won. Punjab is a good example in front of you, notwithstanding the current hullabaloo about Khalistan, in Canada, etc. Within Punjab itself, Khalistan has no support. One of the supporters of Khalistan, Mr. Simranjeet Singh Mann, he is a member of the parliament today. And so the erstwhile terrorists have become chief ministers of states in Mizoram, in some of the other states, or at least to those who had links with the terrorists. So hearts and minds of the people can be won. There is a requirement for a political initiative in terms of at least restoring statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, and also to hold elections. As far as the armed forces are concerned, they have to now dominate the forests. Earlier, there was no requirement. Sometimes there were in the peak of insurgency years, especially south of Pir Panjal also, there were terrorists from Pakistan, because infiltration was large. At one time, there were anything from 1,500 to 2,000 terrorists present. In fact, in the year 2000, I think 3, over 2,000 terrorists were killed in a year. So at those times, they used to make bases in the mountains, in the remote areas. It happened in south of Pir Panjal, in a place called Hill Kaka, and Operation Sarp Vinash was launched to a large scale operation to eliminate them there. And here also in the valley also we used to have them in the forest, and special forces have been launched. But for almost a decade, the main focus has been on the villages. So now with the terrorists having gone into this thing, if we really into the forest and into the higher reaches of the Pir Panjal in particular, there are other ranges also in Pakistan, but in this area, there's the west and the south of Kashmir. So we have to, move into the forest, and some of the counterinsurgency grid, which is we have got 63 RR battalions, now probably 6 less, about 56, 57 RR battalions operating there. And so they have 6 companies each, and there's a kind of a grid established that a base company operating base is within about 10, 12 kilometers of striking at a particular point where incident takes place. And the reaction time is 15 to 20 minutes. Now we will have to move into the forest and start dominating them. I have recommended that 50% of the company operating bases must move there. It's not that there'll be a void in down below, because the terrorists are the same. And it doesn't stop us. We have readjusted our grid before, we can readjust it now. So this is what the army must do. And either the voids can be filled by the Central Armed Police Forces, the CRPF, or it just internal readjustment, and some of the bases should move into the forested areas along the slopes of the Pir Panjal range. Fundamentals cannot be violated. We violate the fundamentals and we'll come to grief. Patience is the key. Patience. It's a long haul, and we have to keep the soldiers motivated. And when the information comes, take all precautions, assume that you can walk into a trap, follow all norms of counterinsurgency, which the army is well aware of. Don't be in a hurry and be patient. That was my advice, and that's why I left it at my last word is that patience is the key.
Right. Well, thank you, General. I think you brought up some very interesting insights. Firstly, into what went wrong in the past 2 years in terms of the army's counterinsurgency operations in the region. The fact that in the recent operations, there were violations of the fundamentals, but also looking at the perspective of the terrorists and how the tactics have changed, and how while Pakistan's overall strategy in the region remains the same, terrorist tactics have changed in the region. And lastly, talking about the significance and the importance of patience in the long haul in dealing with the insurgency in this region. So for viewers interested in reading the full article by General Panag, the link to it is in the description below. Thank you, and we will see you next week.